My father let my mother make my life a living hell and trashed our family because he wanted to set a good example for unity and forgiveness, so I made him lose face in front of the whole family. My father has always been against any confrontation or arguments. He is extremely passive, refuses to stand up for himself, and avoids any conflict. If someone isn't paying attention while walking and bumps into him, he insists it's his own fault. If his employer would mess up his salary, he wouldn't bother fixing it. If a mechanic didn't properly repair his car, he would just accept it as is. This unfortunately resulted in a tumultuous childhood with my insanely narcissistic mother. She controlled his every move. She got him to quit his job and be a locked-in, stay-at-home dad. She had him do every chore. She insulted him at every step. She cheated on him relentlessly and even brought APs into our home. She enjoyed making his life miserable every day, and he never questioned it. My extended family, God bless them, were there for me so many times as much as they could be. They tried for years to make my father leave, but he never budged. When she would direct her anger onto myself, in the form of screaming, insulting or general demeaning, my father never once found the guts to stand up for me or support me. When I was a kid, if I cried to dad about something mom did or said to me, he would sweep it under the rug or just insist I forget about it. Hell, he would even try and justify it. As I grew older, it really set in for me how messed up this was. My mother gladly kicked me out of the house when I was 18, and my father just sat there and looked sullen. Didn't say a damn thing. I joined the Air Force almost immediately and got stationed on the other side of the country. The dynamic was awful and I could have easily gone down the incel route if not for therapy and the amazing people I met along the way. It took years for me to get in a better mental space. I was filled with hatred. My mother left my father 2 years after I got stationed and utterly destroyed my father in the divorce. She was unalived a year later in a DUI with one of her APs. Since I left, I have had extraordinarily low contact or near no contact with my father. As much as I try, I cannot make that connection with him. I recently went to a family reunion and brought my girlfriend with me. My father was there, as it was his side of the family. They have many issues with him, but he is family, so whatever, I guess. I made sure to avoid him. I was chatting with my uncles when I heard my father talk in the background. He was discussing how a coworker of his was going through a divorce as he discovered his wife was having an affair, and was positioned to have a very favorable divorce on his side. My father remarked how his coworker should work instead to forgive his wife and by his own words set a good example for unity and forgiveness, and how he believed he set a great example for me in that extent. I swear it was like a switch went off in my head and I was mentally back to being the rage-filled 18-year-old. All these years and he never learned a damn thing. I turned to him and asked if he was effing serious. He looked at me and started to stutter. I know the next minute was pure word vomit, and I can't relay it perfectly, but to sum it up, I shouted how he was a pathetic father, a pathetic man. His family all know he's a disgrace of a human being who would rather his son be treated like poop than defend him because he's a effing coward. No one would ever see him as an example to live by. His wife would rather fuck half the neighborhood than even touch him, and he should never ever believe anyone respects him. I began to derail and ramble between my shouting, and my girlfriend quickly took me out and drove me home. It was insane just how quickly being away from him made me feel better. She just held me when we got back and told me it was okay. Again, best thing to ever happen to me. I was ashamed of how I lost it and am now going to resume my therapy. That's a given. However, I'm glad I finally unloaded what always needed to be said onto him. Extended family is pretty mixed with reactions. His brothers / my uncles said it was time for him to hear it from me. My grandparents are pissed I did that in front of the entire extended family, with some saying I should have done that behind closed doors instead of everyone. Update: I was up the next morning that I realized I needed to resolve the events of last night. I first spoke to my girlfriend and gave a sincere apology for having her see me like that. She reassured me that nothing was wrong. She'd known me for years and has always known me to be level-headed, and understood why I snapped. She herself has a history of dealing with narcissistic families, so she absolutely understands the dynamic. She only really told me that it would be best to work on spending time around my extended family since my father will always be there. I told her don't worry, I'm immediately going to talk to them afterwards to figure that out. So that part's fine. Looked like kind of an ass in front of her, but I'm making sure that doesn't happen again. I also informed of her my intentions to resume more therapy just to keep myself steady, which she was happy to hear. I called my grandparents and sincerely apologized as well for putting such a sore dent into their family reunion. It wasn't appropriate, and while I still feel it felt good to say that to him, it should have been privately and not in front of everyone. I also told them that going forward, as much as I love spending time with them, since the family always hangs out in one group that my father will always be in, for now, until I can handle being around him, I need to distance myself occasionally until I feel comfortable interacting. I told them that I am nor would I ever be establishing a request or demands of them and that, either way, I need to step back. I guess during my apology and explanation I was kind of just going on a tangent because my grandfather interrupted me to calm down. He told me that after I left, people kind of separated or slowly started leaving, and they eventually were able to talk to my father one-on-one. Seeing me have such a freak out resulted in my grandmother having a mini freak out of her own when she started talking to my father, resulting in her kicking him out. While I have a great relationship with both, my grandmother has always been extra protective of me, so seeing me that way must have set off a fire in her. My grandfather then said that it has become a bit of an open family secret my father's failing. His brothers taunt him about it and generally don't have a great relationship with him, and for my grandparents it's always just uneasy. But seeing me the other day and how it still affects me so much has really liked in for a lot of people that it was really bad. They began to try and say sorry if they didn't do enough, which I very adamantly retorted that they did more than what anyone could have expected. It was very emotional for a minute, but culminated in them telling me that they have decided to distance themselves from my father for the time being, and have given him the ultimatum that unless he has a deep introspective and regularly goes to therapy, that distance may become permanent. My extended family, I've been told, are going to try and reach out or call or whatever, but I asked them if they could relay to them that it's not necessary, and that I'm fine and am sorry to them as well for ruining the day, which again, they told me I shouldn't apologize for being hurt. Since then extended family have sent some messages with the general consensus that it's okay, with some older members complaining about my lack of respect towards my father, and finally, I texted my father hoping to meet at a local coffee shop and have a final talk. I met him and he didn't look good. I think his parents, tearing into him, finally got the message through. I had so many things I could have said, but I instead asked him first thing if the coworker he gave the advice to took it well. He just said that neither him nor several coworkers interact with him anymore. I asked him if he truly 100% believed that every single thing he did for me as a child was for my benefit. He didn't really say anything. I then finally asked if he has any regrets for how I was treated as a child and if he thinks he ever did anything wrong. He looked utterly defeated and just mumbled that he could have done more. I could have poked and prodded and could have gone on another rant, but instead, I told him this should be goodbye and I hope he gets the help he needs. I think finally unloading my frustrations was what I needed to be able to move on and find peace finally. I absolutely need to keep on track for therapy and admit that a public bitching moment isn't okay, but I should be fine.